All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in to WTCF podcast. It's me, Charlie, hanging out in the Forest Park studio and wanted to spend some time talking about the supplement of caffeine, some of my experience with it, and then the goods and bads that come along with it. So, for a very long time in my life, I have been a caffeine consumer, right? Drinking coffee for a very long time, and then especially drinking energy drinks. So, I would be that guy that would be sitting in my college class, and I would crack a can of Red Bull, and then within 5 seconds, that can would be empty, and that was normal. And over time, I continued to go down that route and kind of create a tolerance for caffeine where I just needed more and more and more until eventually I started drinking a lot of Bang Energy. This isn't like a shot at them. They're actually a very caffeinated beverage and should be kind of, careful with your consumption of it because it would have 300 milligrams of caffeine in one 16-ounce can. I would some days have upwards of three of them, which would, again, tier up to roughly 900 milligrams of caffeine in a day. And it's not just like you go ahead and take it and it just brings you back to 300. Caffeine actually does have a half-life of about 5 hours. So basically, if I were to wake up in the morning and right at 8 a.m., slam one of these bangs, let's say I get it done instantly, all 300 milligrams of caffeine are in my system. By about 1 o'clock p.m., I would still have 150 milligrams of caffeine still in my system. By then, I've already had 1 to 2 more cans. So then it would just layer itself on top of it. So again, I would finish that second can and I would immediately be at 450 milligrams of caffeine in my system at once. Now, the recommended dosage is about 400 milligrams per day. So that's roughly about 4 to 5 cups of coffee, depending on how you make your coffee, especially if you're drinking something like Death Wish coffee. That stuff is very caffeinated. So that would be less. There's going to be stuff that's even less than that and way down to even decaf, where there are still trace amounts of caffeine within your decaf. So recognizing that and kind of spending time around studying supplements, I realized that my caffeine intake was incredibly way too high and was leading to issues. Some days when I would get to that fourth can, I would actually be able to feel really, really strange. I would kind of feel it in like my brain. I can kind of feel it in my head. It would be like just really uncomfortable, almost like sinus pressure, because there's other things that are going on in that scenario that are making it really, really bad for you, especially when you get to those high levels. And I believe there's enough actual examples of people ODing on caffeine and being able to take so much, or like, as a goof, let's take 50 scoops of pre-workout and it's super highly caffeinated stuff to begin with. And they ended up, some of these people have died. They have like brain aneurysms, their blood vessels just pop in their head. So again, it could be really, really serious dealing with something like caffeine. Now, with all this stuff about caffeine and now making it seem bad, you would immediately think, well, it's bad for you. Caffeine is actually okay for you. Like anything in moderation, moderation is a wonderful tool to go ahead and use to make sure that we can balance the stuff in ourselves to the best of our ability. Now, when we drink caffeine, we get more focused and alert. I think that's the big things that we get. We get this little jolt of being awake. And what's actually happening in that moment is there's receptors associated to being like sleepy, tired. And what caffeine does is it releases something that blocks it. And again, if I knew more of the details of it, this is me just kind of speaking about my experience with it. If I can remember to go ahead and edit that stuff in, I'll put it in. And if I just did this and there's nothing there, cool, whatever. But I want to go ahead and take a look at it and say, well, caffeine does a lot of good stuff, right? It can make you feel alert. It can make you, feel like you can do a little bit more. It kind of makes you feel like you're more there. Again, performance goes up, even for a long time within Olympics and weightlifting where there's drug testing. They banned caffeine for a while because it is a performance-enhancing drug. It actually does help you to perform better than if you were just to be normal. So it was banned for a while that you could not have caffeine. So if you went to an Olympic meet of doing a clean and jerk or something like that, or something really, really heavy, and they tested you and you had a cup of coffee, you would fail. But after a while, they realized that it was very normal for someone to have like a cup of coffee. That's not something that's illegal to go ahead and get. It's actually fairly common practice. And they kind of realized the error of their ways and saying, well, maybe we won't monitor for caffeine. So a lot of people will take additional caffeine because it does increase their performance. So you'll see a lot of social media influencers go out there being all cracked out on like energy drinks or slamming a bunch of energy drinks. We get this from a very bro culture of slamming energy drinks. I've fallen for bro culture where I've done some of these things. And for a while, the extra caffeine kind of helped. Like when I was cutting, it gave me more energy to go ahead and finish my workouts. So taking a pre-workout for the caffeine of it helped me get through my workouts when I really was too tired to go do it, and it was helpful for it. Caffeine also in that scenario is an appetite suppressant. So by consuming caffeine, suddenly I don't want to eat as much. So suddenly I start to lose weight because I'm not consuming as many calories. So there is some good stuff that comes out of it. However, we're still looking at it from like, it could be a diuretic. So if I'm carrying a lot of water weight and I start drinking coffee, a lot of people run to the bathroom after their first cup or two, right? They need to go and relieve themselves. Because again, it starts to flush the system back out, and then it starts to actually restrict some of your blood vessels. So again, the blood is trying to pump faster through something a little bit smaller. So that's when we end up with this additional like blood pressure. So blood pressure can go up while you're consuming caffeine. Then again, as we go ahead and talk more about some of the negative side effects of it, like the tolerance piece of it is the most daunting thing. There were times in my life where I would be able to slam an energy drink about 45 minutes before going to bed and go to sleep with no problem. That's not how that should work. So doing something like building a tolerance break could be something really helpful. So if I'm sitting around slamming 3 monsters or 3 bangs or whatever these things, like I'm slamming a bunch of caffeine throughout the day, I need to go ahead and find better ways to help myself through that, including drinking more water, because again, it's a diuretic. It's going to start to get me pissing all the time. So I need to be able to stay hydrated, because being hydrated is a good sign of health as well. So again, we have these upticks, improved performance, but then we have these downticks where there could be impacts on your heart. There could be impacts on like how your body processes stuff. Your sleep-wake cycle goes ahead and gets worse. So again, I'm taking caffeine, and my workouts are better, but the caffeine is ruining my sleep, so I'm not recovering. So again, we have these like back and forth where it's like, this is the good thing, this is the bad thing, this is the good thing, this is the bad thing. I think again, it comes down to your ability to monitor and moderate it. So if you're finding yourself like slamming one of these highly caffeinated beverages at like 10 o'clock at night before you go to bed because you like the taste, take a moment and really think about that one. It's like, because what you're doing is trying to ramp up your system at the very end of your day, so you're not going to get as restful sleep. So what do? You wake up and you slam another one because you feel like garbage when you wake up because you didn't really feel like you slept. So what I've been able to kind of work on for myself in terms of like doing some health assessments for my own, again, monitoring my alcohol and then monitoring my caffeine. And I realized that by just kind of taking care of those two, so maybe it's more of the alcohol than the caffeine, but I'm sleeping way better than I did. I'm waking up and like a simple cup of coffee is enough to get me going instead of needing 2 big cans of energy drink of 600 milligrams. I can now get a lot of that stuff done with 75 to 100. I started doing more research around supplements associated to caffeine. Hey, it helps you feel focused and alert. What other things on the market go ahead and help me stay focused and be more alert? So I started looking into things like L-tyrosine, which is in a lot of nootropics. It's one of the main ingredients in nootropics. Bacopa, alpha GPC, ginseng, ginkgo biloba. What else? I think there's probably 1 or 2 more. But I would start to pay attention. Oh, and L-theanine. And I start to pay more attention to the supplements of that when it came down to my caffeine. So things like L-theanine might be able to work as a nootropic to get me a little bit more alert without the rest of the caffeine that's on there. Or something like L-theanine, which actually does have some properties, and I've tested it for myself, and it does work a little bit better than I expected. It actually can stretch the caffeine usage a little bit further. So it kind of like lengthens out the half-life. So you kind of stay a little bit higher, a little bit longer. And I found that to be moderately helpful. So L-theanine is one of those things that I was testing out. Now, this isn't to go ahead and say like have a cup of coffee and slam 5 of these L-theanine and 15 L-tyrosine things. There's a daily dosage associated to it. So for the L-theanine, I think it's around like 750 milligrams. I think I got myself up to about 1,000. But then after a while, the effects really didn't do as much. So after a couple of months of taking it on a regular basis, I kind of just felt normal. So again, I kind of normalized that I had built up some immunity within my system where it just didn't feel the same anymore. And at first, like colors were really bright, things were really vivid, thinking was a lot easier. So it wasn't like I was feeling like in a fog at all. I felt just very sharp, which was a very, very cool feeling. and then testing out the L-theanine, kind of seeing if I can get my caffeine levels down. And what I ended up doing is, over that time frame, my caffeine would still tick up while I was taking L-theanine, and I was just wired like the entire day. So people would be like, well, how are you able to go ahead and do all this stuff? Because I'm loaded up on caffeine and theanine, and I'm just awake all the time. Not a healthy way to go ahead and go through an existence either. So now that I've kind of cut out all that other stuff, I'm just kind of taking a bit of a tolerance break from doing all those things. Like, I didn't drink for 80 days, and I finally had a beer after the run for beer on July 9th. So I had a beer on that one because I wanted to celebrate running a 5K, doing something good, and not putting some kind of stigma on myself that I'm a good or a bad person because of alcohol consumption. I wanted to be able to enjoy it. I do think alcohol tastes good. I think there's a very nice social aspect that comes along with it, but now I'm off the topic of caffeine. So I think it kind of mirrors its own right? Caffeine in the morning, liquor in the evenings. So when we go ahead and start to pay attention to what we're consuming and the chemicals that are coming along with it, and that's a funny phrase for this one. So the chemicals that are in it, as long as we understand what those chemicals will do for our body, there's going to be good and bad things across the board for all of them. There's going to be good reasons, and there's going to be good reasons to take them, and then good reasons to avoid them. And I think that comes down to personal preference, journey, and kind of understanding yourself. Recognizing myself as a bit of an addictive personality, like getting into those things that make you feel things, I will do more of them. And I know that of myself. So now that I've found my ability to get back to a good state of mind, I can, again, use caffeine, but I don't need to use as much of it. Like, I can go ahead and use something like alcohol, but I don't need to use as much of it. And I can start to find myself being a little bit healthier, sleeping a little bit better. So hopefully this little soiree down the land of caffeine is something that kind of helps you to get a better understanding of the consumption that's in it. So any other notes, I'm happy to go ahead and oblige. The only thing I want to go ahead and do is do my best to help the community that I'm in and give as much good information so you can make your own call on what those things are. I gave you some good, I gave you some bad. I have a pre-workout that's sitting on the ground less than 10 feet away from me that I've been sipping on this morning as I've been going through my workout. Is that good or bad? So hopefully you give yourself a chance. Good luck.